Now, another thing I wanted to share was just how I've been using breakout rooms, what I've tried, what I've used, and what seems to work for me. So, first one is, of course, what I mentioned on the last video, which is small group work. The times that I have done it, I've usually broken the kids up into groups of like anywhere from 2 to 4 students. I've just done it automatically at random. I just haven't gotten to the point of having the kids pick their own groups. It's just too hard right now at this point, and I had them do that. Now, one piece of advice that I've been doing is this: is let's say I have 6 rooms full of kids. What I like to do is I like to actually create a 7th room so that what I can do is right before I click open all rooms, I take anybody who was assigned in that 7th room and then dump them into one of the other rooms that are shorthanded so that I've got an extra empty room. I find this really handy because let's say I still want to have a private discussion with somebody in one of the 6 rooms. Well, by having that 7th empty room, I have a place to just temporarily move them to that room. I can jump into room 7. We can have a quick conversation and I can move them back. But otherwise, you lose that privacy. I guess you could use the main room as well, but I find it easier to just move students from room to room. Now, that's another thing I've done. There have been some instances where I knew I was going to be pulling kids back and forth from room to room a lot. And it was really hard to do it from the main room into the breakout rooms. And so what I did that day was I created just 2 rooms. And what I did was I manually assigned the entire class to breakout room 1 and left breakout room 2 empty. And then what I could do is just pull kids from breakout room to 2 rather than inviting and uninviting. It's just, once you get the hang of it, it's hard to describe why, but it's just easier. It's easier to have all the kids in the breakout rooms if you're going to be moving them back and forth between rooms, as opposed to moving them from the main room to a breakout room and then back again. And it's just, in terms of assigning kids, it's easier. So what I did, like I said, was I made 2 rooms. I went to assign and I manually clicked the box for every single child in my class, opened all the rooms, and then a couple at a time, I would come back to this one and I would move them into my empty room, have a conversation, then move them back. And just somehow having everyone in the breakout rooms, it just makes the process easier. And then nobody was left in the main room. Now, on that note, that is a danger. If you are in the breakout rooms, you have no idea what's going on in the main room. And every so often, what has happened for me is a student lost connection. And because I wasn't in the main room, I didn't know they were sitting there in the waiting room trying to get back in. So it's a good idea to occasionally leave the breakout rooms and go back to the main Zoom session to check. Maybe somebody got bumped out. Maybe they lost their connection and they're sitting in the waiting room. But if you're in a breakout room, you're not necessarily going to know that's going on. I think the last thing is on occasion, I've had to change the format of what I was doing during class. Like think back to your regular classroom. Maybe you've got like workstations. And so everyone's kind of in groups of 4 at each corner of the room working at a workstation. But then later you want to switch it to groups of 5, whatever. The one thing that is difficult to do is, once again, just like with the options, you cannot make changes midstream. Once I open all rooms, that's the structure of the breakout rooms. I can't change it. So, for example, here's what happened one time. Mrs. Gordon was working with a couple kids in one room while I was in the main Zoom session working with the whole class. Excuse me. And I was then ready to move the whole class into breakout rooms. But in order to do that, I had to completely close out Jackie's session and very unceremoniously dump her back in the main session before I could restart the rooms in a different configuration and get my whole class going. So again, realize that once you set your breakout room setup, that's the configuration until you decide to close the breakout rooms, and then you can reconfigure. All right, so that is another thing to kind of be aware of. I'm sure there's some other things I had on my list that I'm forgetting, but you'll kind of learn as you go. Like I said, this from an educator's perspective, breakout rooms aren't exactly meant to be used the way we're intending to use them. I'm sure it was much different from a business perspective, but we're getting by with what we can, and so that's a little bit about breakout rooms.